The rumbling sound continued to echo across the shattered plaza, and at that moment, a smile appeared on Mu Chen's face. Through the transmission of the force ripple, his expectations had surprisingly been met with a favorable outcome. The skeletal remains sitting beneath the stone pillar had shifted ever so slightly under the vibration of that force, while the movement was minute. It gave Mu Chen hope of breaking the formation. Of course, Mu Chen was aware that his method was somewhat underhanded, that if those skeletal remains still retained any consciousness, his approach would have been useless. With deliberate resistance, the force ripple he generated would never have been able to shake them otherwise. But clearly, Mu Chen's luck was good. After countless years, the skeletal remains had long since burned out, their consciousness dissipated, and they were now only able to maintain the shape of the spirit array. This gave Mu Chen an opening. Achieving this step was naturally thanks to Mu Chen's study and deduction of the spirit array. After all, it wasn't something that could be accomplished by simply bombarding the area randomly, and Mu Chen not only had to avoid points where the force ripples couldn't penetrate in the spirit array, but also had to pinpoint the exact location to strike. Only by combining these could he transmit the remaining force ripples to the skeletal remains. He exhaled deeply. Then without hesitation, his mind moved, and he once again activated the soul slaughtering guards. As the battle intent swept across him, it transformed into a violent offensive, slamming fiercely into the previously targeted location. Boom! Boom! The entire plaza seemed to tremble violently at that moment. Waves of brutal impact ravaged the ground, tearing deep cracks into the earth. However, no matter how these cracks spread, they could not break into the area where the spirit array resided. They only wound outward, winding and writhing like an enraged dragon, and it was under these waves of ferocious bombardment that Mu Chen saw it. Beneath the stone pillar in the northwest, the skeletal remains trembled continuously, finally moving ever so slightly. It was slowly distancing itself from the stone pillar. This relentless bombardment continued for a full half-hour. By the time half an hour had passed, even Mu Chen was breathing heavily. Continuously powering the soul-slaughtering guards at full force was an immense burden on him. This moment, the outer edges of the plaza were riddled with damage, a scene of utter chaos. Mu Chen's gaze remained fixed on the slowly moving skeletal remains. He calculated the distance and narrowed his eyes slightly. Just a little more, and I'll sever the connection between the remains and the stone pillar. Mu Chen muttered to himself. Then, with his body tensed, he focused his mind, and the soul-slaughtering guards roared to life once more, with the violent battle intent sweeping like a massive dragon, striking the ground with a mighty force. Boom! The earth trembled, and the skeletal remains quivered again, moving forward a little. It was done. Mu Chen's heart leapt with joy that he looked up sharply and saw the spirit array before him suddenly quake. The originally balanced and powerful spiritual energy within it had become chaotic, and the perfectly formed array began to show signs of instability. The 8-stone pillar quickly began to decay. Cracks appeared silently, and without the support and maintenance of the skeletal remains power, the pillar clearly showed signs of shattering. This spirit array relied on the 8 stone pillars as conduits for power. Now that the 8th pillar had failed, the originally flawless array had developed a weakness. Mu Chen gazed at the glowing spirit array before him, now surging with violent spiritual energy in his senses. This formation, which had previously left him powerless, was finally no longer invulnerable. With a flick of his sleeve, Mu Chen withdrew the soul-slaughtering guards into his military token. Approaching the edge of the spirit array, he pondered for a moment, then snapped his fingers. The set of crimson armor appeared and covered his body. This was the crimson dragon armor he had obtained from Xia Hong, known for its strong defensive capabilities. It was essential for the impending assault on the spirit array. Having made the preparations, Mu Chen took a deep breath. Without hesitation, he stepped into the bounds of the spirit array. Whoosh, whoosh. As soon as he stepped in, a terrifying spiritual energy storm swept toward him. The overwhelming pressure instantly made his body feel as though it were carrying a mountain. Mu Chen moved forward with slow, deliberate steps, each one seemingly carrying an immense weight. His steps were incredibly slow, as if each one had to bear tremendous pressure. The crimson dragon armor on his body erupted in a fierce red glow, but these lights were clearly suppressed, unable to spread outward. The armor itself emitted faint creaking sounds. Due to the chaotic state of the spirit array, Chen was not attacked by the 8 skeletal remains, but the terrifying spiritual energy that filled the array still made every step a struggle. He had to constantly shift his position, searching for weak points in the spiritual energy storm, that if he made a wrong move and stepped into a stronger part of the storm, it could lead to catastrophic consequences. Although the spirit array seemed to be no more than 1,000 zhong, Chen spent nearly an entire hour walking through it, drenched in sweat, before reaching the final stretch. By the time he reached this point, the enchanting mandala flower was just within reach. Yet, Chen didn't relax in the slightest. Instead, his body tensed. His gaze shifted to the last stone pillar of the array and the skeletal remains sitting beneath it. As long as he passed through the range of this stone pillar, he would be able to escape the spirit array. However, Chen's brow furrowed deeply. The skeletal remains blocked the only path that on either side of it was an endless surge of violent spiritual energy. If he got caught in it, Chen would be annihilated. In this situation, he couldn't summon the soul-slaughtering guards, as the powerful spiritual energy would undoubtedly trigger the entire array, and all attacks would come crashing down at once. If that happened, even with the soul-slaughtering guards, he would slowly be worn down and killed. At this point, there was only one option: charge through on his own. Chen pressed his lips together tightly, his expression turning solemn. Though the spirit array was extraordinary, these skeletal remains had endured the passage of countless years. He didn't believe that one lone skeletal figure, incapable of activating too much of the array's power, could stop him. With that thought in mind, Chen no longer hesitated. His foot slammed down, and his body shot forward like a bolt of lightning, directly charging at the skeletal remains. Chen was incredibly fast. In an instant, he appeared before the remains and, without stopping, swiftly brushed past them. That very moment, the skeletal remains, whose eyes had been tightly shut, suddenly snapped open. Their eyes blazed with spiritual light. The withered hand of the skeleton reached out, and, without any force, lightly slapped the air to the right. Boom! The space around it seemed to shatter, as cracks spread across the air. A terrifying wave of spiritual energy erupted. Sensing the immense power of the spiritual energy, Chen's expression changed, and without a second thought, he activated his dragon phoenix body. The spirit of the true dragon and phoenix coiled around his skin, turning his body into a golden form. Smack! The dry hand lightly slapped the crimson dragon armor on Chen's body. It felt like a volcano erupting behind him. Chen's body shot forward uncontrollably, flying out of the spirit array and landing at the edge of the plaza. He collapsed to the base of the steps, his body frozen. Behind him, the imprint of a withered hand was clearly visible on the crimson dragon armor. Then, a flash of blood-red light flickered across the armored. In the next instant, the armor exploded violently. Boom! Bloodlight surged as the crimson dragon armor let out a mournful cry, shattering into pieces that scattered in all directions. A piece of armor with immense defensive power, which could rival a quasi-sacred artifact, was utterly destroyed in that instant. Poof! As the armor shattered, Chen could no longer hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body quickly lost its luster, and the spirit of the true dragon and phoenix that had once coiled around his skin dimmed significantly before slowly fading away. Chen's face turned pale. He turned back, a lingering fear in his heart, to look at the skeletal remains sitting under the stone pillar. The remains were once again motionless, but the terrifying strike from before still echoed in his mind. Had it not been for the crimson dragon armor and the defensive power he had activated to its fullest, that strike would have killed him on the spot. It's truly terrifying. These 8 skeletal remains must have belonged to individuals who had reached the Earth's supreme level in their prime. Chen sighed, once again awed by the power of the ancient heavenly palace on the Tianluo continent today. A lower Earth Supreme could establish a top-tier force and become a hegemon. Yet, within the ancient heavenly palace, such a figure could only be considered high-ranking. But even the ancient heavenly palace, with its formidable strength, was ultimately destroyed when the extraterritorial clan launched a full-scale invasion. This shows just how terrifying the extraterritorial clan truly is. They are indeed the greatest enemy to all beings in the Great Thousand Worlds. Chen pursed his lips, his expression serious. After a moment, he reined in his emotions and looked up at the end of the stone steps. On the blood jade lotus throne, the ancient, enchanting flower with petals as black as ink stood silently, its dark glow spreading as Chen gazed at it. His body, which had been tensed all along, finally relaxed. Completely, he took a deep breath, then let it out, feeling a weight lifted from him. Finally, I found you. At the end of the stone steps, the blood-red lotus platform emitted a faint blood light, and the captivating flower rested upon it, exuding an eerie glow that made it look particularly mysterious. This is the legendary mandala flower, one of the rarest divine flowers in the Great Thousand Worlds. Chen stepped up the stone steps, pausing before the mandala flower, his curiosity piqued. The immortal page in his body, which recorded the method to cultivate the great sun indestructible body, also bore the divine markings of the mandala flower, but this was the first time he had seen it in person. It was said that if a mandala flower evolved to its full potential, it would possess power comparable to the true dragon and phoenix, reaching a level on par with the heavenly supreme. However, this divine flower was born with intelligence and mastery over the shadow force. It was incredibly vital, and even when it was newly born, if it chose to conceal itself, not even an Earth Supreme could uncover it. Chen stared at the mandala flower before him. Although the flower appeared to be in a dormant self-seal, he could still sense the overwhelming power contained within it. That power caused the entire space to subtly tremble. Chen couldn't help but marvel at the immense strength, and without hesitation, he clenched his hand. A faint dark glow gathered in his palm, and then transformed into a dark leaf. Although the mandala flower was in self-seal, it still retained an instinctual self-defense. If Chen tried to forcibly take it, it would undoubtedly retaliate, and even a counterattack from a higher Earth Supreme would be beyond his ability to withstand. Fortunately, he had come prepared. The dark leaf in his hand had been given to him by the mandala flower itself to capture its body. Chen infused his spiritual energy into the dark leaf, causing the glow to burst forth and expand. In the blink of an eye, it grew to several dozen zhang in size, wrapping around the flower, enclosing it completely. When the mandala flower felt the leaf's entanglement, it trembled slightly but did not resist. It allowed itself to be enveloped, resembling a black cocoon. Chen waved his hand, and the black cocoon formed by the leaf was instantly sealed away. He then turned his gaze, a strange light in his eyes, toward the blood jade lotus throne. Chen gently ran his fingers over the lotus throne, feeling its icy coolness. Immediately, a cold force surged into his body through his fingers. The sudden influx of energy startled Chen. He was about to expel it with his spiritual energy, but halted when he realized that the cold force was rapidly healing the injuries he had sustained from forcefully confronting the last skeletal remain. The skeletal-like handprint on his back also began to dissipate little by little. In just a few minutes, Chen's injuries were almost fully healed. Even the mental fatigue from controlling the soul-slaughtering guards was alleviated, leaving him feeling invigorated. As he sensed the changes within his body, Chen's expression was filled with shock. Could this blood jade lotus throne truly possess such immense restorative power? It's important to note that the injuries he sustained earlier would have required Chen a full half-day, at the very least, to recover on his own. Yet now, beneath the blood jade lotus throne, the process took no more than a mere 10 minutes. The efficiency was astounding, more than 100 times faster. From this, one could clearly see the extraordinary nature of the blood jade lotus throne. This was truly a rare treasure, with this artifact in hand. Even in the future, should he find himself in dire circumstances and severely wounded, as long as he had a brief opportunity to rest, he could immediately recover his fighting strength. Moreover, the restoration power clearly had an effect even on Earth Supremes, or else Mandala would not have used it to heal. The value of this item, it might be on par with a mid-tier sacred artifact. A gleam of excitement flashed in Mu Chen's eyes as he gazed at the blood jade lotus throne longingly. If he were to compare it to the wind god fan he had previously obtained, the latter would be vastly inferior. He grinned, realizing that not only had he found Mandala's true form, but he had also stumbled upon this unexpected treasure. It had truly been worth the trip. With a flick of his sleeve, he swiftly stored the blood jade lotus throne. Such a precious item couldn't be left here to be buried by the dust of time. After securing the treasure, Mu Chen gave a satisfied clap of his hands, but he didn't hurry to leave. Instead, he calmly sat down, his eyes serene, as if waiting for something. He was waiting for the scripture pavilion to appear. Since entering the ancient heavenly palace, Mu Chen had felt a vague sensation, as though some invisible eye was watching him. At first, he had suspected it was just his imagination, but now he was certain. It must be the mysterious scripture pavilion in the ancient heavenly palace. As Xiao Xiao had said, only those who performed outstandingly were granted access to the scripture pavilion. Now, Mu Chen had not only broken into the second hall and taken the most elite troops under the second hall master's command, but he had also defeated a lower earth supreme in the first hall. He had even overcome a terrifying spirit array that even upper earth supremes had struggled with. If all of this couldn't earn him recognition from the scripture pavilion, then there would truly be no justice. Thus, having accomplished all this, Mu Chen needed do nothing more but wait to see if the mysterious scripture pavilion would respond. As Mu Chen sat cross-legged, the grand hall fell silent once again. Time passed slowly in the stillness, but no sign of change came. It seemed that the scripture pavilion had no intention of acknowledging Mu Chen's efforts. Mu Chen's gaze flickered slightly, but soon, his expression became firm and confident. As long as the scripture pavilion still had intelligence, he was confident that with his current performance, he would qualify for entry, because he believed that even within the talent-filled ancient heavenly palace, his achievements would surely stand out. Mu Chen's eyes, calm and resolute, fixed on the void, as though he were staring at the unseen scripture pavilion. Through his gaze, he communicated his right to enter in the empty space. It seemed as though something had sensed his intent. After a moment of silence, Mu Chen's pupils suddenly contracted. Before him, the void rippled with waves, as if ancient Sanskrit sounds were emanating from it. The space distorted, and within the void, an archaic, dark blue, mysterious pagoda appeared, unreachable in the empty air. Mu Chen's heart raced as he gazed at the mysterious pagoda in the void. He could sense that the pagoda seemed to be watching him, almost as though it had a consciousness of its own. Yet, he did not feel feared. He continued to gaze at it, his expression unwavering in the stillness of the grand hall. The two locked eyes for what seemed like several minutes. Then, the mysterious pagoda shuddered slightly, and Mu Chen heard an ancient voice, faint but distinct, drifting through the air. Steadfast heart, unwavering confidence, you may enter the scripture pavilion. Mu Chen's eyes widened in shock. The ancient voice, was it coming from the scripture pavilion? Had the scripture pavilion's intelligence awakened to such a degree? This was no ordinary sacred artifact. A hum filled the air. As Mu Chen was stunned, the scripture pavilion in the void slightly rippled. He saw blue light gathering, eventually forming a series of bluestone steps that stretched across the void, extending right in front of him. Clearly, walking up these bluestone steps would allow him to enter the mysterious scripture pavilion. Staring at the steps, even Mu Chen's usual composure couldn't help but stir his emotions. That a sense of dizziness lingered in his mind. Had he really succeeded? Once he entered the scripture pavilion, he would have the chance to obtain the method for the great sun indestructible body's evolution. How long had he been waiting for this moment? When he was young, he left the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, crossed countless continents, and arrived at the Tianluo continent, in the Great Luo Heaven domain. He went from a mere leader to ultimately becoming the new emperor of the Great Luo Heaven. All his efforts had one final purpose: to gain the method for the great sun indestructible body's evolution. Now, after years of striving, his goal was finally within reach. How could Mu Chen not feel a surge of emotions? Taking a deep breath, Mu Chen slowly suppressed his excitement. He then respectfully bowed to the scripture pavilion in the void and, without hesitation, took a step forward, stepping onto the bluestone steps. Step by step, Chen ascended the stone steps. With every step, the stone steps behind him vanished into thin air. When he reached the final step, the surrounding space changed. The mist cleared, and in its place was a wondrous scene. A mystical, ancient scripture pavilion stood amidst the clouds, as if from a fairy tale. The door of the scripture pavilion slowly opened, and a myriad of mysterious lights gathered within, ancient and powerful. Without a moment's hesitation, Chen advanced and stepped inside. He had entered the most coveted and sacred ground of the ancient heavenly palace. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, Chen's palm clenched tightly, and his black eyes shimmered with an uncontrollable thirst. The immortal golden body, I've arrived. As Chen stepped into the scripture pavilion, an endless light appeared before him, followed by darkness. When the light faded, he found himself standing in the midst of an infinite starry sky. He walked upon the stars, gazing out into the vast, boundless expanse. Countless stars twinkled in the sky, some bright, others dim, filling the heavens in a dazzling display. Is this the inside of the scripture pavilion? Chen murmured to himself, clearly taken aback. This was not what he had expected. The so-called scripture pavilion was not a place filled with bookshelves, and he hadn't seen a single divine ability scripture so far. Buzz. As Chen pondered, the starry sky trembled slightly. Moments later, a deafening roar rang out, and a flood of streaming lights suddenly rushed toward him. As the lights neared, Chen realized these were not ordinary streaks of light. They were countless shooting stars, flashing in various colors, creating a spectacular sight. However, when Chen focused his gaze, his eyes widened in shock. He realized the streaks of light were not meteors or fireballs, but scrolls. These so-called divine ability scriptures have turned into these shooting stars. Chen was taken aback. He instinctively looked up, his gaze fixed on the distant stars, which appeared so far away. His eyes gleamed as he focused intently. In that moment, he seemed to see ancient scrolls hidden among the stars, faint and elusive, radiating mysterious, obscure fluctuations. It was clear that those stars contained powerful divine ability scriptures. So many scriptures, but where is the immortal golden body? Chen furrowed his brow. The scripture pavilion's collection was simply vast. In Chen's estimation, just the foundation of this scripture pavilion could rival that of some ancient races. Without guidance, finding the method for the immortal golden body would not be easy. Though slightly frustrated, Chen would never give up. After a moment of deep thought, he stopped hesitating. His body transformed into a streak of light, shooting towards the countless shooting stars in the sky. Swish, swish, he weaved through the countless meteors, focusing his senses. After all, he had cultivated the great sun indestructible body, so it was likely that there was some mysterious resonance with the immortal golden body as well, that if he got close enough, perhaps he could sense its presence. During his search for the immortal golden body, Chen had no interest in the powerful divine ability scriptures around him. He wasn't sure whether there would be multiple opportunities to choose, so if he carelessly picked one, it might lead him out of the scripture pavilion. In that case, he would likely regret it deeply. In the face of uncertainty, he let the final goal guide him. Amidst the vast starry sky, Chen was like a traveler of the cosmos. Here, it seemed that even time lost its meaning, and he had forgotten the passage of time. Only fixated on searching for his goal. As he continued moving, he passed by countless divine ability scriptures, some of which were easily within reach, but he didn't hesitate to let them go. Time passed on. This moment, Chen found himself outside a massive, fiery red star. The star emitted a crimson glow, its flames constantly sweeping outward, warping the surrounding space with its intense heat. Chen stared at the star, where an ancient crimson scroll lay. On the scroll, fiery dragons seemed to coil around it, and faintly, he could make out some ancient characters. Apocalyptic dragon flame art, major divine ability. Chen's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected it to be a major divine ability. Even now, the most advanced technique he had cultivated was only a fragment of the body sacrifice demon fist. If he had the complete body sacrifice demon fist, It might rival a major divine ability, but with only the fragment he possessed, its power was, at best, comparable to a minor divine ability that a major divine ability of this caliber would make. Even the Upper Earth Supreme covet it that Chen stared at the fiery red star, and he had a premonition that if he truly wanted to obtain it, he had a high chance of success. However, after a moment of silence, Chen turned around without hesitation. A major divine ability might indeed be precious, but it could not shake his resolve. After an unknown amount of time walking, the meteor shower he had once passed was long gone. Now, Chen walked alone among the stars. This search was incredibly monotonous, but he proceeded slowly, his heart as still as an ancient well. Yet, the sense he had been waiting for still hadn't come. In the vast starry sky, Chen suddenly stopped. He gazed at the seemingly endless stars. Perhaps the star representing the great sun indestructible body was somewhere among them. But this time, Chen felt that it wouldn't be possible to find it by searching actively. Chen had a moment of clarity. The immortal golden body was the second evolution of the great sun indestructible body. Its third evolution would be one of the legendary primordial law bodies, the eternal undying body. Given its power, it was bound to occupy the most prominent position within this scripture pavilion. Such a treasure, if sought intentionally, might never be obtained, unless it was willing to reveal itself. Chen's gaze lowered, and then he sat cross-legged directly in the starry sky. That a powerful spiritual glow erupted from his body, and spiritual energy gathered behind him, slowly transforming into a massive golden silhouette. The golden sun appeared behind the silhouette's head. Clearly the great sun indestructible body that Chen had cultivated at this moment. This great sun indestructible body, like Chen, sat cross-legged in the void. The great sun turned, and endless golden light erupted, shooting into the starry sky. Chen's mind gradually calmed, and he let go of all active seeking, allowing the great sun indestructible body to radiate its brilliance in the starry sky. Golden light spread across, and a profound silence descended. Time seemed to slow down immensely, as if it was frozen. The stillness wrapped around Chen's heart, making him feel as though countless years had passed. The monotony was enough to drive a person mad. As time passed, Chen continued to channel spiritual energy within his body to sustain the great sun indestructible body, but gradually he began to feel signs of spiritual energy depletion in this vast starry sky. The consumption of spiritual energy was immense, and there was no way to absorb more. Maintaining the great sun indestructible body required a constant flow of spiritual energy. Even so, Chen did not give up. He poured all the spiritual energy in his body into the great sun indestructible body. It seemed like a long time had passed. The spiritual light around Chen's body had completely dimmed, and the great sun indestructible body behind him was no longer shining. The intermittent flickers of light felt like they were about to fade away. Yet, despite this, the immortal golden body that Chen had been hoping for still hadn't appeared. Still not working? Chen muttered hoarsely to himself. Even someone as determined as him couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment. He began to believe that this method might not be feasible. But after a brief pause, his eyes lowered further, and with a calm expression, he activated the last trace of spiritual energy within the Supreme Sea, channeling it into the great sun indestructible body. The massive form of the great sun indestructible body once again became bright, but this was merely a brief flash of light. After the brilliance faded, the body began to dim and become illusory at an astonishing speed. The great sun indestructible body grew more and more intangible, until, with the exhaustion of spiritual energy, it completely dissipated into a shower of light points in the sky behind Chen. And as his spiritual energy was drained, the darkness gradually closed in on his vision, and his eyelids slowly began to shut. However, just as Chen's eyes were about to sink completely into darkness, it was as though a ripple of sensation suddenly spread through his heart. A strange feeling surged from an unknown source, filling his mind. Chen's heavy eyes snapped open in an instant. He stared ahead, and a faint smile appeared on his face. For before him, a massive star had appeared, its golden light radiating endlessly, ancient and vast. The light coiled into a golden dragon. Within the star, Chen saw a thin golden page. The golden page seemed to be etched with the most primal, ancient patterns, each one appearing as if it were a natural part of the world, possessing a mysterious power capable of summoning wind and rain. Chen's gaze locked onto the golden page, and through the golden light, he could vaguely see ancient characters slowly moving across it. Immortal golden body. Chen stared at the mysterious golden page for a long while. Finally, a soft chuckle escaped his lips as he slowly lowered his gaze to his tightly clenched hands. At that moment, his hands, once as steady as a mountain, were trembling ever so slightly. A sense of near-trembling fear surged within Chen, sending chills through his skin. How many years had he dreamed and worked tirelessly for this moment? Looking at the golden scroll, Chen finally realized that all those years had truly allowed him to grow. He smiled faintly, placing one hand behind his back, and began walking forward, ignoring the dazzling golden light. Step by step, he walked forward and finally entered the golden star. Immortal golden body. I finally found you. When Chen stepped into the golden star, he could feel the scenery around him shifting, space twisted, and when his vision returned, he found himself standing on a golden plaza that seemed to have no end. The ground of the plaza was like molten gold, dazzling and radiant. Giant golden pillars soared into the sky, piercing the clouds. The entire space was filled with a sense of vast, awe-inspiring grandeur. Standing on this golden plaza, Chen gazed toward the center, where a golden altar rose majestically to the very top of the altar. Golden lights swirled around, and within that light, a thin golden page floated serenely. Chen focused on the golden page. He could feel a slight throbbing at his temples, and a subtle pain radiated from his mind that it was because his emotions had reached their peak at this very moment. After all, the goal he had been tirelessly pursuing for so many years had finally appeared before him. Yet, despite the immortal golden body being so close, Chen didn't lose his composure and think it was already within his grasp. If such an extraordinary treasure could truly be obtained so easily, it would be a naive fantasy. According to his estimation, it was likely that obtaining it would require going through trials, but as for what kind of trial, there was no use in dwelling on it now. Regardless of what it was, Chen had already decided to face it all today. With this thought crossing his mind, Chen calmed himself, standing quietly on the golden plaza, his eyes gently closed, waiting for the upcoming trial. His wait did not last long. Soon, he opened his eyes and looked towards another direction of the golden plaza. At that moment, the space there began to distort, and as golden light gathered, a figure appeared from within. Chen gazed at the familiar figure that emerged, his expression calm, without the slightest trace of surprise. Because that figure was, of course, Garuda, who had also cultivated the great sun. Indestructible-bodied, a genius cultivated with all the efforts of the sacred demon emperor of the sacred demon palace, and someone who had perfected the great sun indestructible body to its peak. Chen had no doubt that Garuda had the means to reach this place. Chen looked indifferently at Garuda. The latter also opened his eyes and immediately noticed Chen's presence. When Garuda saw that Chen had arrived first, his previously calm expression shifted slightly. You didn't die? Garuda narrowed his eyes, his brows furrowing. It was the elder of the sacred demon palace who had tried to stop Chen earlier. Even though the elder had paid a heavy price for entering the ancient heavenly palace, his strength was more than enough to instantly erase any perfect ninth grade. Garuda had previously believed Chen was certain to die, which was why he left without hesitation. After all, he couldn't figure out how Chen could escape from the hands of a lower earth supreme. However, what he thought was impossible now stood before him in the form of Chen, who was smiling faintly from afar, clearly showing that he had survived the sacred demon palace elder's attack. I haven't obtained this immortal golden body yet, so how could I die? Chen smiled at Garuda. Garuda's face darkened slightly, but being deep in thought, he quickly concealed his emotions and coldly said, I don't know what method you used to escape from Elderswa, but it doesn't matter. I'll personally take your life. Chen gazed at Garuda with a faint smile, Don't you think it was him who escaped from me? If it weren't for that old man running fast, once Chen had set up his battle formation completely, Garuda might have been the first Earth Supreme to fall to Chen's hands. Garuda crossed his arms, sneering. If you really had that kind of power, would I be standing here? Chen clenched his palm, and the military token flashed into his hand. Spiritual energy surged through him, and just as he was about to activate it, his eyes slightly narrowed, and he shook his head helplessly. He realized that when he had tried to summon the soul-slaughtering guards earlier, he had failed. Clearly, the connection between him and the soul-slaughtering guards had been severed here, likely by the mysterious scripture pavilion. Do you want a seemingly fair life-and-death battle? Chen muttered, but there was no trace of resentment, just a hint of regret. After all, only the most powerful Great Sun indestructible body had the right to evolve. This kind of selection process was like raising a poisonous insect. Only the strongest would stand out, that if he had directly used the soul-slaughtering guards to defeat Garuda, it would not align with the selection rules for the immortal golden body. If I had known this earlier, I should have dealt with him back then. Chen sighed, then shook his head that time. He had only just used the soul-slaughtering guards for the first time, so he wasn't entirely sure he could defeat Elder Zhua. Given the uncertainty, it had been safer to let Garuda leave. After all, if Garuda and Elder Zhua had joined forces, no one knew what might have happened. It was better to handle things alone. Even though he couldn't use the soul-slaughtering guard's power now, Chen still wasn't afraid of Garuda. Garuda, seeing Chen shaking his head with regret, was even more convinced that Chen's survival was nothing more than luck. With a cold smile, he pointed towards the altar at the center of the golden plaza and said ominously, "Do you know what that is?" "Oh, that is the sacrificial altar. Oh, you know what needs to be sacrificed." Garuda licked his lips, his eyes dark as he stared at Chen. "It requires the sacrifice of a great sun indestructible body." Chen's pupils slightly contracted. Only by sacrificing an indestructible sun body can the divine flame be ignited, allowing the golden page to burn, borrowing its power to refine the Dharma body, and ultimately complete the evolution. Garuda chuckled coldly. "So, I actually breathed a sigh of relief when you arrived. Otherwise, if I had to ignite the divine flame alone, I would have had to endure some suffering." "I see." Chen was somewhat enlightened. He hadn't expected that this altar would require a sacrifice. It seemed that all this information must have come from the sacred demon emperor, who had told Garuda. After all, that guy had once been the mount of the heavenly emperor and knew many secrets of the ancient heavenly palace. In that case, I feel a little better. Chen seemed to relax. It turned out that to evolve the immortal golden body, such secret techniques were required. It was fortunate he hadn't solved this problem earlier, or he might have made a mistake. Such a clueless fool. Garuda's words were meant to disturb Chen's mindset, but the latter showed no sign of being shaken. This made Garuda's eyes darken. He could no longer be bothered to waste words. With a sudden stomp of his foot, boom, surging spiritual energy erupted from Garuda's body like a storm, sweeping through the heavens and earth. The powerful force even caused the space around them to tremble. After undergoing the heavenly river baptism, Garuda's power had clearly reached the peak of the perfect 9th grade. With his talent, if he managed to survive this ordeal and leave the ancient heavenly palace, he was very likely to break through to Earth Supreme. Feeling the overwhelming spiritual energy erupting from Garuda's body, Chen's expression became slightly more serious. Without the help of the soul-slaughtering guards, Garuda was certainly a formidable enemy. He took a deep breath, his face becoming solemn. This battle would determine who was the true victor. Of their two indestructible sun bodies, only one could complete the evolution. Thus, this battle would undoubtedly be brutal. Boom. At the same time, spiritual energy at the perfect 9th grade erupted from Chen's body like a volcanic eruption. Golden light surged around his body, and the sounds of dragon roars and phoenix cries rang out. The spirit of the true dragon and phoenix hovered over Chen's skin, bringing with it immense defense and power. Standing still, Chen resembled an ancient beast, exuding a terrifying aura of oppression. "Huh, I didn't expect your physical body to be cultivated to this extent." Garuda looked at the faint outline of the true dragon and phoenix behind Mu Chen, his eyes narrowing. Upon seeing Mu Chen's many powerful abilities, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. When they first met, Garuda hadn't taken Mu Chen seriously because, based on their comparative strength back then, he didn't think a newly initiated 9th grade expert like Mu Chen would pose much threat. However, who could have predicted that in such a short time, Mu Chen's strength had skyrocketed, entering the perfect 9th grade, and even gaining the ability to escape from elders was grasp. Had he known this, Garuda would have intervened when Xiaoyu dealt with Mu Chen, using a thunderous method to slay him, avoiding all the troubles that followed. But now, though troublesome, it wasn't too late. You really think you're the only one with such powerful physical strength? A sinister smile appeared at the corner of Garuda's mouth. He then clenched his hands tightly. Suddenly, black spiritual energy erupted from his body, and his form expanded in an instant. His body seemed as if forged from black iron, incredibly tough, with ancient black runes spreading across his surface, each one radiating a terrifying power. Garuda's low growl now carried a strong killing intent, echoing across the golden plaza.